Almost 60 years ago, Professor Gerson Cohen, who later became the chancellor of JTS, delivered what I believe was an astounding and radical commencement address at Hebrew Teachers College in Boston. He stated, "A frank appraisal of the periods in which Judaism flourished will indicate that not only did a certain amount of assimilation and acculturation not impede Jewish continuity and creativity, but in a profound sense, this assimilation and acculturation was a stimulus to original thinking and expression, a source of renewed vitality." Cohen unfolds several examples to debunk the popular historical reading of the past, that our redemption from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, and our survival as a Jewish people depended upon our adherence to our language, to not changing our names, or even our dress. On the contrary, our tradition's adaptability and metamorphosis has served to keep it relevant and compelling over time. He honors the challenge of assimilation and the fears that arise from it, given our minority status. However, he cautions against a misread of our history and the fossilization of the tradition to create an illusion of preservation. And so enters Yaakov in this week's Parashat Vayishlah and his anticipated reunion with his estranged brother Esav. When he sends messengers to his brother Yaakov, tells his servant to say the following: "To my lord Esav, thus says your servant Yaakov, I stayed with Lavan and remained until now. I have acquired cattle, asses, sheep, and male and female slaves, and I send this message to my lord in the hope of gaining your favor." Rashi is curious why, of all things, Yaakov chose to convey to Esav that he said, "Garti, im Lavan garti," I stayed with Lavan. Rashi notes that the word garti has the numerical value of 613. 613 mitzvot. In fact, it's the same letter in Hebrew. Taryag, which is what is said to be 613, is if you switch around the letters, it spells garti, I lived or I stayed with. Thus, he meant to say, though I have sojourned with Lavan, I have observed the Taryag HaMitzvot, the 613 mitzvot, and I have not learned his evil ways. Now, obviously, I just want to say, in the course of the Torah's unfolding, the mitzvot have not yet been given. We haven't even gotten to Sinai yet, but this is part of our tradition's principle of ein mukdam ve'ein mu'achar b'Torah. There's no early and there's no late in the Torah. Of course, Yaakov observed the 613 mitzvot. He clung to the mitzvot so tightly that he was not at all influenced by the world around him. He made, according to Rashi, himself a ger, a stranger, like garti, ger, garti. While Rashi thinks this is admirable, one could say this is exactly what Gerson Cohen cautions against: to isolate ourselves from the world, or to see everything around us as a threat, deprives us of the productive tension and dynamism that is possible in living in two worlds simultaneously. The Hasidic Rebbe, the Sfat Emet, the Gerer Rebbe, takes Rashi's explanation to another level. He is more concerned about the spiritual state of our existence. He teaches that we as human beings are both earthly and heavenly. Our earthly body, which fulfills the mitzvot, is the garment. This is a very Kabbalistic and Hasidic notion that the body is a garment for the soul. But the soul is from the heavens. Unlike Rashi's explanation, which seems to discourage assimilation, the Sfat Emet cautions against being an all-rightnik, being satisfied. For him, the essence of religious life lies in bridging the earthly and the spiritual, the heavenly, but never being fully at home or too comfortable in either. The Sfat Emet not only believed in the power of Yaakov being a ger, a stranger, a sojourner in Lavan's home, but he teaches and he believes that Yaakov should always live as a ger, a stranger, no matter where he is, whether in Lavan's home or anywhere else. We see the struggle between the earthly and the heavenly lived out later in the chapter in this parasha. Yaakov, the famous story, stays alone in the night and wrestles with the Ish, a man who was also, as Becca said last night, understood to be many things, a man, an angel, a sav. Though Yaakov is wounded in the struggle, he ultimately triumphs and demands a blessing from this Ish. Vayomer lo Yaakov ye'amar od shimcha, ki im Yisrael, ki sarita im Elohim ve'im anashim v'tuchal. The Ish says, your name shall no longer be Yaakov, but Yisrael, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed. What is interesting and somewhat curious is that this moment of blessing, of the name change, and by the way, it happens again because God affirms the name change in the following chapter, is that the Torah actually doesn't retire the name Yaakov. It is still used, even though the Pasuk says, your name shall no longer be Yaakov. The blessing, Yaakov, is still used while also calling him Yisrael. The blessing Yaakov receives acknowledges not only has he two names, but he lives in both places, heaven and earth. I offer one more peek at this parasha from a section that we will read this morning in the triennial reading. Rachel gives birth to her second son. Vayehi b'tzeit nafsha ki meta, vatikra shemo ben Oni, v'aviv kara lo Binyamin. But as she breathed her last breath, for she was dying, she named him Ben Oni, but his father called him Benyamin. Every single child, and there were many, as we know, born to Yaakov is named by his mother or her mother. Here, Rachel, with her last breath, names her second son Ben Oni, son of my suffering. But Yaakov overrules her and renames Benyamin, which is typically understood to mean Ben Yamin, meaning the son of my right hand. I mean, there's also some commentaries that speak to it being a location, but the son of my strength is the way it, I think, reads most naturally. Another duality, another tension. He receives two names, just like his father had just received earlier in the parasha. Yaakov, at least from my understanding, doesn't want his son to be defined exclusively by his origin story, his mother's suffering and death. In the same way that the Ish didn't want Yaakov to be defined by his crookedness, which is what Yaakov means. Yaakov is blessed with another name, Yisrael, which means straight, like Yashar, like Yeshurun, is B'nai Yeshurun are the people that are straight. And also the one that struggles with two worlds that he lives in, heaven and earth, as what the Ish said to him, that you have struggled. Sarita is like Yisrael, with heaven and earth. You could say it would be much simpler to live in one name, in one place, in one existence. The hero or the villain, Yaakov or Esav, Yaakov or Yisrael, Ben Oni or Ben Yamin. But we carry both, stranger and insider, divine and human, heaven and earth. We can't create simple binaries to solve a very complicated world and existence. The struggling and the wrestling is where the creativity, accountability, and vitality is actually born. Gerson Cohen knew that this was the truth of our own history as a Jewish people. Our thriving, often against extraordinary odds, is born out of this productive tension and not the fossilization and reification of our origin story. We are both Jews and Americans, or over the course of our history, Jews and countless other identities. We need to live steeped in that dual reality, anchored in both, and the tension and vitality that arises between them. This coming week, we will celebrate Thanksgiving. And unlike last year, I pray that many of us will have the blessing of being with family and friends. I feel extraordinarily grateful to be going to my parents' home and that our extended family will join us. I am at the same time holding the duality of this very holiday, the origin story that many of us learned in school or picture books or around a Thanksgiving table, and how it is or is not accompanied by a more brutal reality of the colonization of the land of this country, the genocide and erasure of the indigenous peoples, and the much more complicated history of this nation. As I return to New Fairfield, Connecticut, I acknowledge that the land is the traditional territory of the Schaghticoke, which means gathered waters. In 1724, colonial settlers received approval from the General Assembly of the Colony of Connecticut to establish a township on the land of this tribe. And as the history goes, actually, they think that some of the Native Americans were sold to slaves. I also acknowledge that the land that our sanctuary and community house are built upon is the traditional territory of the Lenape, who named this land the island of Manhattan, which means hilly island. There is no simple and pat way to make the displacement of Native Americans to go away. Just as the name Yaakov didn't go away after he became Israel. There is no disloyalty to my lived experience as an American to acknowledge and name that those that came before me on this land were native to it. It is not because I am woke that I give voice to this story, this duality, their names. It is because I was taught by our incredible tradition to be a ger, a sojourner, not fully at home anywhere. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And gratitude is also the name of our people, Yehudim. Leah conceived and bore a son and declared, Pa'am oded et Adonai al kein kara shemo Yehuda. This time I will thank God. Therefore she named him Yehuda. May we hold the struggle of Yisrael and the gratitude of Yehuda. And may we tread lightly on this land that has multiple names and be blessed to be the eternal ger, with our feet on the ground and our soul in the heavens. Shabbat Shalom.